Senior Analyst at the Global Blockchain Business Council. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's episode of the Global Blockchain Business Council and Global Digital Finance's Global Leaders Series. This is a weekly global town hall with policymakers and business leaders to hear their insights into the emerging COVID-19 crisis and field questions from members of the community. Today, we have the pleasure to be joined by crypto Congressman Jason Hsu. He is former legislator at large for Taiwan, senior and current senior advisor for strategic cyberspace and international studies. And our host today is Sandra Ro, GBBC's CEO and GDF board director. Today we will hear about Taiwan's response to the coronavirus pandemic, what Jason sees as the next wave of technological innovation, and the state of the blockchain ecosystem in Taiwan. I'd like to provide some brief background on our guest today. Jason is currently serving as senior advisor at the Center for Strategic Cyberspace and International Studies. From 2016 to about 2020, Jason served as legislator at large in Taiwan's parliament, overseeing technological developments, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Among the crucial legislations he introduced and passed are the Fintech Regulatory Sandbox Act, the Self-Driving Vehicle Act, Angel Investment Law, Cybersecurity Management Act, and the Virtual Currency Guidelines. Jason is a proponent for cryptocurrency and blockchain. He is known as the Crypto Congressman, and he is credited for setting up the Asia Blockchain Alliance, Taiwan's Parliamentary Coalition for Blockchain, and the Self-Regulatory Organization. He is currently a Draper Hills Fellow at Stanford University's Center for Democracy and Development and Rule of Law, and he is also an IVLP Digital Economy Fellow at the U.S. Department of State. We encourage everyone to submit questions at any point during today's conversation by clicking on the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And without further ado, I'd like to hand things off to Sandra and Jason. Thank you.
Welcome and hello, everyone. Thank you, Sophia. I have to say, I'm quite excited about today's discussion. One, because it's our first sort of outreach into the Asia Pacific region. And we know there's quite a lot of great best practice sort of government related efforts around the pandemic right now. But also, let's face it, we need to catch up on innovation. So I'm really happy to have Jason here. I saw Jason back at Davos only a few months ago, and my gosh, how much the world has changed. I promised Jason that we'd be heading over to Taipei at some point in 2020 for an event, but for now, this will have to do. So I appreciate Jason dialing in so late in the evening in Taipei. So welcome, Jason.
It's so good to see you, Sandra.
We're going to kick off with the obvious, but let's start there and we'll see what kind of questions we get today in the next hour. And I have a number of questions for you, obviously. So how has Taiwan, and particularly the government, managed to navigate this pandemic so well? It really does stand out from a handful of countries out there who are dealing with this, in a way that seems well organized and well executed. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on the ground, what you've been seeing, what you've been experiencing for the audience, and what technology's role has been in this effort?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, as Sandra pointed out, that when we were in Davos in the end of January, the outbreak of the coronavirus was just beginning to emerge, with cases broke out in the Wuhan province in China. At the time, people were just kind of wondering what will happen next, and no one really took it seriously. And I remember, bidding farewell to everyone in a somewhat cold, but in a warm setting in Davos. Everyone was quite happy returning their home. Nobody would expect it. The world would be as it is today. However, on my way back to Taiwan, I knew something big was about to happen. Taiwan has experienced a SARS in 2003, which was a big pandemic that hit Asia. It's a similar coronavirus, except the origin of the virus was a cousin of COVID-19. And Taiwan suffered quite a bit. So we remember that experience vividly. So in our first reaction to COVID-19 is that we treat it as a highest alert. So once we found out there are cases happened in Wuhan, we took extraordinary measure in sending out alerts to Central Disease Control Agencies and asking them to start monitoring the inbound travelers from China. And we actively monitor the situation in Wuhan. And the next thing we know, a few days after we heard the outbreak, Wuhan locked down the city. And what happened next was that the situation just got worse day after day. And for Taiwan, we start by tracking all the incoming travelers and making sure that everyone coming in, we measure their temperature. We make sure that they are not showing any symptom of the coronavirus, and we make sure that we track their progress within 14 days. So I think with this pandemic, countries that are taking it seriously and addressing it at the top priority and emergency measures are able to contain the virus quickly. And also, we found out that this virus is spread over human-to-human transmission. So the fastest way is for social distancing and wearing masks. And pretty soon, we knew that would be an issue for everyone to have masks. So our government worked with all the masks manufacturing factories and making sure that government control the volume of masks, and every citizens can get a mask and to wear, and to making sure that everyone is protected. And our government also developed a real-time mask distribution tracking system, and in using the pharmacies in neighborhoods and in districts and in townships in becoming the distribution points for all the masks. So pretty soon everyone has masks. And although there are some lines outside of drugstore and pharmacies, but by and large, we have masks to wear. And so that drastically reduce the possibility of transmission.
So, Jason, let me stop you there for 1 second, because that's interesting. The tracking and tracing system, was that actually around before the pandemic, or did they actually build it in-house on the spot? How did that work? Do you know?
So this tracking system has already been set up in the beginning of the pandemic. We knew it's important to trace those suspicious of the symptoms. And we need to make sure that this is a emergent state. This is not in normal time, and we call it a wartime, because this is indeed a war without weapon. And we making sure that every citizen is informed and briefed that they are being monitored, and they are only being monitored for the purpose of social safety and their own health. However, we don't plant any tracking device or chip on their phone. What we do is we use the telecommunication tower and in monitoring the effective areas of those who are being tracked and also who are in self-quarantine. And so, the data sets that are collected are stored in a secure area, and after these people who are tracked are released, or somehow they are free from the potential transmission period, the data will be deleted. It will be deleted publicly, and you will be informed to the users that are being traced.
So when you think about the level of trust, in most countries and most citizens, it's pretty low these days to government. And it's actually in decline, not going up every time I see a poll in any country related to their trust in government. But in Taiwan, there seems to be a relatively high degree of trust in government. Is that right?
Yeah, so we do worry that this become a statecraft monitoring scheme for countries that uses this excuse to effectively and massively monitor their civilians. And in order to make sure that citizens feel safe and are completely aware they are being monitored for the social stability and health reasons, we make sure this is completely transparent and everyone is held accountable. And so once the period is over, also the citizens received an update that you are basically off the hook and you are no longer being monitored. We only monitor you because this is a important and risky period, and we are also making sure that you are aware of it. You always opt in, and you have the right to opt out when it's over.
Okay. And when we think about the further use of technology, you mentioned the mask distribution effort, which, in a lot of countries, there have been massive issues around who gets masks. And frankly, there's also questions around why should I use a mask in certain cultures, because it's a cultural shift for a lot of countries, maybe not in Taiwan, but obviously in the US, we're having massive debates. You should see some of the neighborhood chat groups I'm on just whether you should even wear a mask or not. When you think about the system of distribution, the PPE system, did the masks come from manufacturers in Taiwan, or did you have to import them, or what were some of the circumstances around the supply chain on that?
Yeah, we are pretty good with manufacturing, and just about anything that are in need of manufacturing that can be assembled in Taiwan in a pretty short amount of time. So in this case of the coronavirus outbreak, the government assembled all the mask production lines within 17 days. That is that we are able to ramp up the production volume from daily 2 million masks to 13 million masks in 17 days. And that's 6x ramp up.
Wow.
And that requires tremendous amount of efforts in consolidating the production and making sure that all the workforce is working in sync. And also we know that this would be important materials that will be very much sought after. So governments pre-purchase all the volume with price 2 times higher than market price. And so that these production lines that are being called upon to support government initiatives won't have to worry that they have extra inventory or some other malicious businessman might use this opportunity to hoard these materials. So all this has become quite transparent. And with this experience, we are moving on to other important medical supplies and equipment. For example, ventilators and goggles, face shields, and other important necessities of the medical emergency supplies.
So you're manufacturing all of those items now, and also testing kits, are you doing as well?
Yeah, the testing kits is harder because Taiwan, ironically has fewer cases that we can use to test the virus data. So we are now working with the US government, though, to create the green channel for the testing kits to be clinically trialed and deployed to the US. And for masks and ventilators, we are already shipping to the US. And I think starting from this week, actually today, we already lift the ban to export the masks. Okay. So I imagine going in the coming weeks, we will be exporting a large amount of masks, and along with other PPEs and other face shields and goggles and things like that.
Great. Wow. So you've managed to pivot your manufacturing capabilities quite quickly, and now you're
Mm,
able to even export.
yeah.
That's great. Okay.
And I also wanted to say that this is a time for pivoting, and especially economies that are being plagued by this pandemic need to think, how do we shift the paradigm and also rethink the economy model, and also think about the focus, and as well as how we should distribute the resources. And I sense that in this time around, U.S. is in a very difficult situation, particularly with the manufacturing moving to China,
Yeah.
and that has been a big problem. And now we are working with the U.S. government to invest manufacturing jobs and also open factories in the U.S. And I think you read about the news of TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, is moving to their next generation fab, a 5 nm semiconductor fab to Arizona. And
Mm,
so this is a good time for manufacturing to relocate back to US.
great. Well, so then there's a trend right there we should be watching for is increased Taiwan-US collaboration and also
Hmm.
manufacturing hubs coming back to the US. Just staying on the topic of Taiwan and what has been done as an example to the world. What about the community and entrepreneurs and the innovators on the ground in Taiwan? How have they assisted or partaken? Do you think you see a groundswell of potential innovative companies now coming out of this pandemic and beyond? Give us some thoughts on what you've seen on the innovation
Hmm.
side and the community.
You know, Sandra, this is a very difficult time and very tough for everyone.
Right.
And I think startups, communities, especially facing a tough challenges. And I think you see startups actually laying off workforce and actually letting people go, and also big funds actually sending letters to their portfolio companies asking them to reduce their spending and everything, and so it's no difference in Taiwan as well.
Okay.
Startups community also suffer quite a bit, and our governments come up with the what we call the stimulus package,
Mhm.
and to make sure that a startup can get through this period, and basically government provides funds as a convertible notes to be invested in startups, and startups can buy back after they pass this period. And so over time, we have over 1,000 startups applying for this so-called stimulus package fund, and to make sure that they can get through this difficult period of time. But I also observed a very interesting trend. That is, this is so-called non-contact economy is on the rise,
Mm,
and which also means that things like fintech or virtual economy, like e-commerce, delivery business, or this Zoom software that we are using, and everything that works offline is being transformed online with a faster efficiency and effectiveness. So in Taiwan, I set up a program called Health for All. You can check out the website healthforall.tw. It's an initiative to call for startups, particularly startups that are working on COVID-19 solutions, to come together to help solve these questions. And so we have AI company that use AI model to detect early respiratory syndrome disorder. So this is for doctors, that they can detect the patients with the early symptom of the coronavirus.
mhm.
And also we have a AI lab that train the AI model to calculate or to predict the spread and transmission of the virus pattern. And what's exciting to me is I now see hospitals, medical professionals working with startup entrepreneurs. For example, there's one hospital in Taiwan that has 4,000 beds that are working with startups to use 3D printer to print open source ventilators and with a low cost that are quickly assembled and easy to made. And they are now shipping this design blueprint and as well as a toolkit to overseas. And so for me, that's exciting. And, and this is changing the way that industry used to work in silos and is creating more opportunities for startups to work with corporations.
So along that same line of thinking, clearly people have pointed out opportunities in healthcare in the aftermath of, or during and the aftermath of all of this. What other industries, and I know you've already mentioned the digital economy or the virtual economy, but specifically for Taiwan, what do you think some of the big opportunities will be as entrepreneurs retool, pivot, whatever word you want to use, their business models?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to stress the importance of fintech. I think right now a lot of people are trying to experience everything mobile, everything online, and everything that's basically can be done online through easy to use interface and transaction, digital health services, companies that are working with online pharmacies or medical devices or things that are use the data to analyze and provide intelligence for companies to reduce the amount of time used in the workforce would be greatly useful and has a lot of potential. And also, I think people start getting paranoid about privacy, and I think anything related to privacy or encrypted technology would have a lot of potential. People are scared of at this time that everything is being shifted online, but also people are aware of being exposed and naked online. They are not sure if things that they are sending are safe or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that we will see more and more encryption enabled devices or software having a lot of potentials.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think all of these things, and also blockchain for sure. Companies start to look at more and more ways that they can redesign and redevelop their way of operations. For example, trade finance that on blockchain. If you need to take 3 days to issue a letter of intent or other things, all these things can be done on blockchain or rotary system and things like that. Yeah.
Yep. And also, I think, you mentioned the cross-border increased participation between Taiwan and the US and the Green Channel. Frankly, if you're going to build out systems like this or opportunities like this, they should also be looking at how blockchain could be incorporated from the outset. So I appreciate that. And I'm glad that you mentioned blockchain, because we're going to move on to deep dive into more specific blockchain and cryptocurrency discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about fintech and digital economy, money in particular. There is probably an acceleration that's now happening. In Taiwan versus the US, for example, there's very different payment systems. There's very different mentality as well. We have a plethora of credit card usage, debit card use. The card is actually a medium that most people use anyway in the US. How is it in Taiwan in terms of adopting anything from, crypto all the way through to just digital money? What's the latest and what's happening there?
Yeah, this is still a very early stage and also a very, I would say, primitive stage. A lot of education is needed in this space. And I think people still are quite underexposed to the value of a crypto-enabled economy. But with this COVID-19 and the coronavirus, people start to think, what can they do with their digital property? And to even think about what digital property means. It means that everything we own online and everything ranging from our social media data to our cell phone contact and everything like that are all being part of the so-called digital property. And however, for digital cryptocurrency to be used widely, I think we need to make that switch mentally and as well as with effective policy enhancement. And right now we are seeing less imperative or less motivation to do that because so much of the focus and anxiety is focused on this COVID-19. How do we get economy back on foot? And how do we make sure that pop and mom shop can survive and continue their operation? But countries like China already, making headway. We see in April, they already come out with their DCEP, digital currency electronic payment system. They are already set up 4 cities to be experienced, to be used for their DCEP. That is Hangzhou, Shenzhen, and Shanghai, and Guangzhou. So these 4 cities combined total, the population is over 100 million people. So this is a large group of people that are testing a national issued digital form of a transaction and a money, or they are redefine what it means to be money. And for central bank to issue a CBDC, that means that central bank is the essential endorser, and they are using the M0 sort of a reserve to say that government is now issuing this, and this is the official currency that you can recognize. And I think that is a signal to other economies that countries that face this pandemic or this coronavirus, if they mentally can switch and also leapfrog to some things that they are fixing, and they're trying to go back to yesterday's normalcy, and they should forget it. They should think about what exactly it would be like tomorrow. So, the countries that are testing new form of transaction after this pandemic passes would be so far ahead with countries that are still fixing yesterday's problems.
Right.
So this is, to me, also is an alert that we are so much about thinking about yesterday's problems, but politicians, leaders don't think about tomorrow's possibilities.
Yeah. No, you are saying a lot of wise words there. I'm going to head on to the open questions because we've got quite a few that the audience would like to ask you. So I'm going to pick a few here.
Sure.
I like this one as a start. What do you know now that you wish you had known when you first started in Congress?
Oh, that's a very tough question. Yeah, that's a very tough question. Well, I think I would say I have no regret. I think that I pretty much done what I set out to do, and my term is by appointment. And I think I have, sort of set the milestones of digital economy, cryptocurrency, and blockchain, and AI. These are the 4 tracks that I focus on. And I think if I had known what I would have done differently, I would probably say one thing. I would say that there are moments that I felt I could probably go even farther in helping people imagine what the future could be. But somehow I was dwarfed by my own fear and anxiety of being alone in this journey and not having enough of support system.
Yeah.
But I think if I have that courage in building that support system, and in getting a small group of people that can go with me, I think I can go farther. Yeah.
Well, that actually gets us to another question, which was, oftentimes it's an uphill battle trying to convince or educate those who know nothing about technology or very little about technology, let alone cryptocurrencies and how blockchain technology works. How did you engage with your colleagues in Congress when you were, in full in the thick of it, about getting them on board around crypto? Because you passed quite a few major pieces of legislation in your tenure, and that's a major feat in the best of countries. So can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit
Well,
about that?
yeah, I think I'm a rare species in the political circle that I am a technologist. And I think the way that I communicate with my colleagues, that I make sure that the language I speak, it's easy for them to understand. And sometimes it's not about partisan interest. It's about the commonalities that we we uh, we we search, and we come together in the middle way, and in making sure that what exactly is the vision that we are driving. For example, for autonomous vehicles, for AI, the way that I envision to set up a law like this is that I imagine what our society will be in 30 years. And in thinking about that, I'm not setting up a law or amend an article in an existing law that were fixing yesterday's problems, but I'm imagining a new potential possible scenario for future society. And that is, I think, what essential lawmaking should be. That is to empower and enable that our citizens to untap, to unleash their potential. And the way I communicate with my colleagues is that, hey, there are political stuff that we do, but there are also things that we see differently. But also there are things that we must put down our differences in changing the way we manage our society in the future. So that's kind of how I communicated with them. It's a hard battle, but luckily I think most of the time they come along, and I think they find it fun and interesting in working with me.
That's great. Really appreciate that. So we've got a question here. It says, Taiwan is well advanced on the use of technology, blockchain, and fintech. How can you share your experience with less developed markets like in Africa? So what would you say to those in countries where perhaps the infrastructure is not as solid, or the technology communities may not already exist, at least in the kind of core numbers that you've got in places like Taiwan and Taipei? What advice would you give?
The question is about the
in
countries
developing
that,
markets, yeah, in developing markets.
yeah. Well, I think the blockchain is a fundamental technology that countries that are, whether or not it's developed or not, are on an equal footing. And countries that can use the new technology can embrace new possibilities. So I would say countries that are less developed and less with the viable infrastructure should think about implementing blockchain from the get-go, and basically thinking about ways that you can use blockchain to increase your country's visibility, that you can retool or reorg and your economy. And there are a lot of things you can do. And there are a lot of things that are confined in the physical and traditional economic system that will have a lot of potential possibilities if you use blockchain. And I talk about the example of DCEP that China is using, and now with the US also kind of pivoting their Libra, and going from the Libra consortium to the so-called stablecoin kind of a platform. I think countries must think about a new way of understanding global monetary system, and think about what a potential information economy and also internet of value should be like. And with that, I think countries, a countries less economically prosperous in Africa is no less than a country that is already developed in Asia, so to speak, or in other continents. So I think we should be always think about progressive ways to move forward.
I appreciate you saying that. And I just, I had a conversation yesterday with a colleague about the fact that blockchain technology is actually a level setting technology because a lot of it is open source and frankly, very lightweight in terms of getting applications built on top of something that is already functioning as a public or distributed network. Certainly a lot cheaper than buying something proprietary and trying to build from there. So I'm gonna ask a couple more questions from the audience because we're getting quite a few more. Do you see a future, and this is from Stan, do you see a future of Taiwan having a digital currency, and what is your vision or time frame around that? Maybe we expand that out to not just digital currency, but also digital assets and the usage of it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I was in the legislature, I vocally addressed the importance of Taiwan issuing a CBDC or a central bank digital currency. For the past 2 years, the central bank keeps saying that, oh, we are studying it, but we haven't figured out a way or a necessity for it. But it's not always about the necessity. I think it's about creating that necessity in a lot of times. And I think human beings are so much hinged on having to deal with the issues of survival. And I think if you think about all the economic systems that are working and things that are not working today, I think we need micro tests, micro experiments. And whether it's not a UBI, universal basic income, or the CBDC, or a new way of monetary system, or I think government today needs to be bold because we will face a black swan event like pandemic all the time, and will be our new normalcy. And so I would say for Taiwan, it's never the best timing. It's we create the timing, and for me, this pandemic provides the best timing for everyone to think alternatively. So now we are distributing or allocating about 100 billion NT dollars for crisis emergency fund. And imagine this large amount of money being distributed on digital currency. And it can be managed, and it can be well used, and it can create a lot of different potentials. Will there be any technical difficulties and obstacles? Yes. For example, transaction speed. There will always be the technical issues that needs to be resolved, or the security, or the KYC and AML, all sorts of things. But all this can be overcome. And so I call for political leaders out there to have the will and to have the courage to work with the community, to work with the tech communities, to come up with a new way of social and economic system that is somehow ahead of the problems that we are working, that are continue to haunt us from yesterday, but that take us to tomorrow. So I think blockchain and cryptocurrency are definitely an important part of it.
Going back to the $100 billion you said,
yeah.
NT?
Yeah.
Is that, wait, I'm not sure that I understood. Is it existing today, or is it something that's
It's already been passed
okay.
in the Congress.
Right.
So
okay.
Which means they will start deploying that fund. And it's going to be used in all industries, every walk of life.
Right,
yeah.
But it hasn't been deployed quite yet in terms of actual.
No, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
What's the time frame on that? Do you know?
I think it's been passed in Congress, and I
Right.
believe that we will be starting deploying it in July or September coming forward. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for, giving us an insight around that. And I think there's some questions here around, you've spent time now in government, you're a technologist. It's also the case in most governments around the world. There are very few technologists who are actually part of government. What's next chapter, and how are you seeing things? And tell us a little bit about the center work that you are doing.
Yeah. So I think the past 4 years has been a great learning journey for me. I think it's sort of a crash course for someone like me who never had a government experience to understand how government works and what the problems are in a short amount of time. And I think the fresh thinking, the ideas that I brought in to the government and the legislature are somehow will find its way to continue to shape up the future days for this country. And for me, my passion is still in the technology, and I like to start experimenting some of the theories that I read or I was thinking about when I was in the Congress. For example, I'm thinking about quadratic voting. How would a new type of democracy be implemented in a day of a digital age? Can quadratic voting be possible in electing our officials and putting their words in action and making sure that every single vote counted towards action rather than only on the day of the voting. And so these are the things that I'm thinking. And also I think a lot about digital property, and in this day and age I think about the data that we leave online and we leave behind, and also how we treat the data and what it means to future generation. So I'm still working with the legislators and the government, essentially to create a policy of advocacy groups to advocate the digital DID, the digital ID and privacy, and the digital property. And I think with these three things, I can say I'll keep myself busy, but I won't rule out the next potential possibility of running for office in a couple of years as a mayor. So for me, I think about those things and to implement them on a city level. So imagine, I pass a law for autonomous vehicle. So imagine if you're a person, you use your phone and your data can account for your points, and the points can use for your daily transportation, and you earn your education and health points with everything that you served for your society, and the things are all on blockchain. And I want to be the type of politician that really help people think forward, but not to get tangled in yesterday. And speaking of the center that I'm currently served as a senior advisor, it's an international think tank. It particularly deals with cybersecurity, 5G, AI, blockchain as well. It's a think tank, a nonprofit based in UK. And my job is particularly look at all things related to cybersecurity, statecraft, fake news, misinformation, media literacy, how to understand data in a cybersecurity age, those type of things. So that's where I spend my time. Yeah.
Wow, that's I think you have enough going on at the moment, yeah?
Yeah.
So there's a question here. I think your advice would be very well received, which is, what advice would you give to someone who is interested in policy, but really disillusioned by politics? And let's face it, that's not just one person. A lot of people probably feel that way. And how do we marry that? You know, I'm going to extend that question to one level, another level, which is how do we marry that with the fact that we do have, you know, if I talk about this as the technology community, there's not enough of us in government actually influencing the laws that are being passed. You're one of the few out there in the world. What would you do to encourage someone who is sitting on one side of the camp right now, who may be interested, as this person said, in policy, but really just hates the politics of actually getting elected and, you know, dealing with all that other stuff? How do you navigate?
Yeah, I think for me, I think this is an analogy I will use. You've seen the people playing mud game, and you either watch them, throwing mud at each other and kind of laugh at them, or you get in there and help them organize it. And because everywhere you stand is in the mud, so you're in the mud anyway. So nobody can escape from this mud that we are in, since you have nowhere to escape and you have to deal with it. And everything is politics. You know, you talk about blockchain, you talk about crypto, you talk about even, a simple thing like, healthcare, or Taiwan in getting into the WHO. It's all politics. And I think people like you and me, including you, Sandra, and the person who asked this question, we are the rare breeds in this circle that we are able to take that technology language and spin it in a way that policymakers can understand. And we need more people like us, and we need more evangelists in the public policy area that basically can help educate, can help improve the system. Although they're bound to be compromised, but I think if we don't take a step forward, I think we will always be just standing still. And I think if that means stepping into unknown, I think it's better than standing in still. So I would say I encourage more technologists to work in the policy and to work in the political related work, or come work with me and to help me realize some of the ideas that I have in mind about hydraulic voting, about autonomous vehicles, about AI, about blockchain. And I think you'll find it rewarding for a period of your life to devote in the public sector.
Fantastic. And you guys heard it out there. If you're interested in policy work at all, we need to get in it, because as Jason said, we're already all in it anyway. So might as well be in an area where you can influence real change. Which actually leads me to a question from someone named Mark, asking about how his company could participate in helping funded blockchain startups with the development of their platforms in Taiwan. I would imagine it's directed to you. You mentioned there are several different media outlets in Taiwan that have the blockchain startups who are working there. Is there a way we can connect this person to some of the companies that are on the ground in Taiwan?
Yeah, well, feel free to send me an email. I'll be happy to put you in touch with the right folks.
Great. Well, I think that would be appreciated. So reach out to Jason. And you're on Twitter and LinkedIn and all the usual social media. So you're not too difficult to find. You could also reach out to GBC, and we'll make sure to reroute the connection. Okay. And then we're going to be wrapping up in the next 5 minutes or so. But I wanted to ask you, and going back to the politics question, there's probably I believe there is one scientist who's in the Congress right now. Bill Foster out of Illinois, and he's a great advocate for technology. The U.S. also has a massive deficit when it comes to those who understand technology and the digital age we are already in. So we have a complete mismatch when it comes to the makeup of who are our legislators versus what's actually happening in the real world, and accommodating for that. It's like you said, it's trying to fix something from yesterday when we're actually in today and tomorrow. What can the U.S. politicians or the current political state, what can they learn from Taiwan is the question, and vice versa. What do you think some of the more symbiotic learnings could be? And should there be an increased communication lines between Taiwan and U.S.?
I think absolutely. I think that U.S. and Taiwan share common values. That is freedom and democracy. And I think there's a lot of interactions tracing back to Silicon Valley and back to the 1970s when Taiwan created semiconductor industry. And so historically, we've had a lot of close relationships. And during this difficult period of time, I think U.S. can work closely with Taiwan on the public health front. We are a small island, and yet we demonstrate some of the best models that work in any type of a large-scale pandemic diseases. And I always believe that good inventions come out of bad times. You know, you think about Google. Google came out in 2000 when dot-com bubble burst. Or sharing economy companies like Uber and Airbnb, they emerged out of the 2008 financial crisis. And so I still believe in positive side. And so I'm hopeful that good inventions will come out of this period. And I think we shouldn't feel despaired. I know this is difficult, and we should focus on funding more science, basic science and fundamental research of medical research and some of the science and innovation. And I think countries should really provide substantial funding to it. And also, I think we need to work closely in understanding the pandemic is here with us, and we should take necessary measure to reduce amount of impact on social, economic, educational, and welfare level. And so all these things, I think we should all learn from each other. And lastly, I think now is also a good timing for US and Taiwan talent to exchange. We open for US entrepreneurs to come and set up companies in Taiwan, and vice versa. I am now working with manufacturers to open factories in the US. We are now taking 2 masks factories to open in California and Georgia. And so to ensure that basic manufacturing capacity is taken care of. So with all these things, I think we will continue to build on this foundation.
Well, on that note, I think you've given a very positive and more optimistic outlook on what can be done, and I think that's really valuable. I'm going to ask you one final question before we wrap up and hand over back to Sophia. For any entrepreneur sitting anywhere in the world right now who thinks, okay, I really have a good idea, I have maybe even a co-founder, what do you recommend, what do you suggest to these entrepreneurs that are out there who are debating whether this is not the worst time to start a company? What practical advice would you give? Because I think the advice you would give is if you really believe in your idea, go for it.
Well, I think it's the best of time, but it's also the worst of time, right? But
it's scary.
Yeah. And so I would say go for it. And I think this is probably the best time you could ever ask for innovating and trying new things. And nobody would call anything dumb, because right now I think we are seeing a new horizon on the rise. And I think if you're an entrepreneur, don't be afraid of trying new things, and whoever is preparing and prepared will emerge so far ahead if you plan, work on your ideas, and grow during this time. It is only those who feel despair and who kind of just frustrated and not doing anything that would be fallen behind. But if I am also an entrepreneur myself, I work harder now because I know now I will never ever get this amount of time. This is almost God, if there's one, hit a pause, and the entire earth is sort of on a pause. And it's good for us to be on a pause because we can think and iterate, and we can test out new things. So if you are a startup, if you're an entrepreneur, don't waste this time worrying. Make use of this time creating new things, working with your partners, or catching up with ideas, and I think this would be a fantastic time.
And if there's entrepreneurs out there who do want to set up shop in Taiwan, can they reach out to you and you can connect them with the right people on the ground?
Absolutely. We have a gold card program. It's basically an entrepreneur visa that you can come and set up your companies in Taiwan. You have tax breaks, and you have a lot of perks. So all of you are welcome to Taiwan. My email is congress.jason@gmail.com. So, or you can reach out to GBBC, and I'm also a GBBC regional ambassador, proudly ambassador. So happy to help in any way.
Well, thank you, Jason. I will have to say the hour has gone by very quickly, and we could talk to you for hours more, but we're going to let you go. Have a good evening, and I'm going to hand back over to Sophia. Thank you for today.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Jason, for ending us on that very uplifting note and that call to action. And thank you to everyone who tuned into today's webinar. We look forward to welcoming you back next Tuesday at the same time, 9 a.m. Eastern, for a conversation with Dante Disparte, Vice Chair of the Libra Association. We will also be circulating a link to the recording of today's webinar, as well as you can also contact Jason, so we'll provide his information on Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. We encourage you to visit the Global Blockchain Business Council and Global Digital Finance online and on Twitter, on LinkedIn for more regular updates on programming. We have a lot of exciting things in the pipeline on both ends. Thank you so much to everyone, and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. 再见. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jason.